guys, and welcome back to the channel, and more importantly, welcome back to REN's Day. Today's reaction is going to be an interview that REN did with Justin Hawkins from The Darkness. This is a snippet that said what really happened to REN. Let's check it out. Now, I do follow Justin Hawkins' Rides Again channel because he does a lot of good stuff. This is just a snippet from the interview because the interview is nearly 2 hours long. I'm not going to react to the full interview. That'd have to be done in parts. But he has released this one that says what really happened to REN, so I was saving it for today. Okay, what really happened to REN? Let's get it.
When you were first diagnosed, is that because it says on here that that Sony Records decided to relieve you of your contractual obligations because they didn't think you were.
So there's a bit of a, because it's funny, you know, when you start reading comments about yourself on the internet that and people run with these narratives and then they become.
And after a while you stop. Yeah.
yeah, and people run with it. So it wasn't as sinister as, because I read some comments like Sony found out that REN had mental health problems and then dropped him, which really,
even though Sony's dropped him, the guy's still trying to be nice about it. It's not as sinister as all that. No, but if they drop you, they drop you. You know what I mean? But he's still trying to be nice about it, this is another thing that I like about REN, because he's real, isn't he? He doesn't want to upset anybody.
I read some comments like Sony found out that REN had mental health problems and then dropped him, which really wasn't how it panned out. So I was working with an amazing guy called Eric Papale who did the Defamation of Strickland Banks, that first not the first Plan B record, but the Plan B record that went massive and made him huge for.
Still need to check out Plan B. So if you've got any suggestions for Plan B, anyone who's watching who likes Plan B, then let me know, because I've never listened to them.
Not the first Plan B record, but the Plan B record that went massive and made him huge for. He was on top of the.
That's the one where he started singing more kind of Motown
soul Motown stuff. Yeah, and Eric was a big contributor to that, and so Eric spotted me.
So was he an A&R guy, or is he like a producer?
No, he's just a brilliant musician, man. He's a producer, so he's and a very good human being as well. But he was walking past while I was busking when I was 18, 19 years old, and I was busking one of my own songs, and he was just like, "Man, your lyrics are incredible. I'd love to take you to London and make an 100%. Album with you." And we started the process of doing that. And then Sony took it. They were a subsidiary of Sony, so they were a sub-label of Sony, and Sony took that on board, and we signed a contract, and we were working on this album. And then halfway through this album, I became very, very sick, and I was almost like pretending I wasn't sick, because this is my whole, you know, up until I was 10 years old, it was like this thing that was manifested. And the thing that you said, like I was doing all these industry showcases and all that stuff, and people were like, you know, he's going next big thing, and all this stuff was happening, and I was in the process of making this album, and I was just so. This is when the symptoms started, and I was feeling dissociated, tired. Pain started happening in my body, and there were times where I'd be in the studio and I'd do a take and I'd excuse myself to go to the bathroom, and there was one time I threw up blood and then just pretended that it hadn't happened, and I came back and I carried on.
Whoa, because obviously if you're making it in music, you're trying to make that impression that there's nothing wrong with you. You need to put on the good show so that people, you know, want to work with you still want to, you know, he was grabbing his opportunity, wasn't he? Right, wow. So we're going more in depth into when these symptoms started and stuff, and going back to what he said before last time I paused it. The lyrics. Someone's heard his lyrics, and his lyrics are absolutely sublime. They're one of my favourite things that REN does is the lyrics. It doesn't even matter how the song sounds. The lyrical content is, you've always got something to talk about with his music.
There were times where I'd be in the studio and I'd do a take and I'd excuse myself to go to the bathroom, and there was one time I threw up blood and then just pretended that it hadn't happened, and I came back and I carried on doing the take without letting anybody know. And there were other times where I'd have these industry showcases and I'd be in the backseat of a car crying, and I'd be sleeping, and then I'd get off there, brush it all off, and get on stage. But it came to a point. I was managed by a guy called Andrew Mancy at the time, who had done the Chemical. I think he'd been the manager of the Chemical Brothers. There was a point where I started breaking down on stage as well, because I was just so weak. Like, even standing and singing on stage became this massive, and people started obviously noticing this. And I think there was a time where Eric was like, you need to take some time out, and so I did that, and I was very aware, and I took time out of making this album, which was a really difficult thing to do. I went to live with my mum.
Because if you're motivated to make the music, you're motivated to get yourself into the industry, etc. Then you beg, steal, and borrow. You do what you had to do that was necessary to make yourself get up and do, no matter how you was feeling. I get that totally. I totally get it.
Took time out of making this album, which was a really difficult thing to do. I went to live with my mum, and it was intentionally only going to be for 3 months, but I didn't end up getting out of bed for a whole year after that. And about 6 months into that, it was a very mutual conversation between me and Eric at the time, running through Sony with this contract. I was just like, I don't think I've got it in me to do this, and Eric understood it, and we parted ways, and it wasn't so much that it was a dropping, it was more that contract expired, because there are a certain amount of years, and that was
didn't get to finish the album
very early. That was maybe 2001, and I probably didn't really have much of a life then up until 2006, 2007. So so it was just, these terms of the contracts of maybe 3 years or something like that. It just, the time passed, and it never happened, and
but surely, because obviously you've got the, I mean, I don't mean now, because now he's independent, he's doing great. Surely at the time when he started to feel better again, or could manage it, if you like, surely he could get that contact again and say, look, can we start this again and try it again, sort of thing. I wonder if that was ever a thing. I might imagine the interview's not over yet, so.
These terms of the contracts of maybe 3 years or something like that. It just, the time passed, and it never happened, and it was heartbreaking, man, because in my head I was like, but this is my prime, early 20s. Everybody always tells you that this is the best time to do all this stuff, and so it was really difficult. Like I was pretty sure that was my chance, and it had come and gone, and more so the more time that elapsed, the more it felt like that. And then when I started making the Freckled Angels album, which was the Freckled Angels album was actually half of the tracks that I made with Eric, and I remember messaging him one day years later and asking him if I could use the tracks, and he was just like, go for it, which is really nice of him. He didn't expect anything in return. And I still, there's still part of me that feels, I haven't reached out to him since back then, because there was a part of me that felt almost like a guilt for letting them down, for having so much belief in me and pouring so much time into me.
He's so considerate of other people, even corporate people from record labels and stuff like that. He's still very compassionate towards him, and the fact that he wrote these songs for the original album and put them on Freckled Angels, and then asked permission if he could use his own stuff because he was recording them. You know what I mean? What a stand-up guy. I
haven't reached out to him since back then, because there was a part of me that felt almost like a guilt for letting them down, for having so much belief in me and pouring so much time into me. And I felt immensely guilty for not finishing that project, and I did feel.
You shouldn't feel guilty though, because I think like the whole nature of the traditional music trade is that people like him will invest a lot of time in a lot of artists that they believe in, like yourself, and then some of them are going to fly, some of them will not, for a million different reasons. Most of them won't, and they only need like one to fly to justify the corner office. They're going to be okay.
No, of course, and it's not that he was struggling.
It's like spreading a net, isn't it? Spreading a net over a load of artists. Hopefully, one of them makes it. And then what they do, then they channel on energy into that person when someone makes it big, sort of thing. Probably what they were talking about with the Plan B song before.
They're going to be okay.
No, of course, and it's not that he was struggling for money in any sense, because I guess there was the defamation and he did a lot of, he was responsible behind Daniel Bedingfield and a lot of other people's amazing production. But it was, I think it was just more that there was so much belief and excitement in that recording process, and it wasn't really that I had let him down through my ability. That's what I was frustrated by. It was this insidious outside force that I had no control over, that just ruined everything. And it was for a long time. It took me a while, and when I started making the Freckled Angels album, when I got, I guess, myself to a point with my health where I could still record, I was still spending or every day in the bedroom, but I had my music set up in my bedroom. I couldn't really leave my house at this point, but I decided I'd pretty much at this point, in my head, I was like, I'm probably not going to live to see 30, so I'd like to do something that I feel I've always known that I've had this potential to contribute musically to the world. I like to make this, even if it's only my mates that see it. I want to finish this Freckled Angels album.
And that's it. And there you go. He didn't care if it... This is what he said in High Ren when he says, I don't make music for the mainstream. I do it for this, that, and the other. That's that concept he's saying there. I want to make music. I might not live till I'm 30. I'm going to make it now, even if all my mates hear it. I'm not bothered as long as somebody's listening to my music. And that's what he's all about. And the fact that High Ren blew up and then everyone's watching all his other videos and stuff now is a testament to his work ethic and the fact that he deserves it. He absolutely deserves it. Absolutely.
To the world. I like to make this, even if it's only my mates that see it. I want to finish this Freckled Angels album.
So
that's what I did. I used half the tracks that we did back in those early days, and then I produced things like Crutch and Make My Way and Dominoes and a few things just by myself in my bedroom, and I threw together this 16-track album which I self-released, and it did modestly okay. It was really just my friends streaming it. Now it's seeing a lot more views because everything else has become successful, but
that's what I just said. Since High Ren blew up, everyone else has started watching everything else, which is why I do Ren's Day. Okay,
friends streaming it. Now it's seeing a lot more views because everything else has become successful, but and then I just self-put it out there, just thinking like, this is going to be my contribution, and I'll probably die in a few years. And
that's a horrible way to think, isn't it?
It's all about legacy. That's the recorded.
He's getting upset.
Medium. It's your legacy, isn't it?
That's the.
He's thinking back there, and you can see it in his face. His eyes are going a little bit glossy, and he's thinking back to the probably the thoughts that he had. I'm not gonna live very long. I'm gonna die early because of this. I'm chronically ill all the time. So I'm gonna make this music and I want to put it out there before I'm not here anymore. And he's going through that emotion again. You can see it in his face. It's heartbreaking to see.
Recorded medium. It's your legacy, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah. And
so it's pretty healthy to think like that sometimes. It's like, because when it comes to the many demands on our time as artists and people who want to talk to us in any context, really, it's like everything that you do, you have to decide whether it's content or art, and the stuff that's art, that's really your legacy. The rest of it is completely disposable, and it's just the way you communicate the fact that you do art to the rest of the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that stuff's important. I mean, I think when you have like profound health issues, it does make you think more carefully about what you're going to be leaving behind. But everybody should think like that,
of course,
all the time.
Yeah. Because we are a finite creature. We will expire. All of us will. So it's just that when it's very much in your periphery, and it could be any time in the immediate future, you start thinking about it a lot more. But the truth is, we're all it's a very bleak way to put it, but we're all just heading to our inevitable demise. So, but the
fact that he thought he could see it in the near future of periphery, he probably felt like he had to get this music out now. You know what I mean? And then obviously with the treatment he's having and stuff, he's getting over it and getting better, which is good. So he's got past 30. You know what I mean? He's at 33 now, isn't he?
Heading to our inevitable demise. So, but it was interesting. So I made this album. I put it out there. It felt really good to have that out there. I started posting it from my house to people that wanted it, and they were the very manageable orders coming through. And then my health dipped again after that, really badly, and I went into full-blown psychosis. I guess is my brain's way of creating an alternate reality that was more explainable than my actual situation. So like I was. Because it felt so unfair. Like there was no doctor could diagnose me what was going wrong. This was still before I knew I had Lyme disease, and also as well after the allopathic medicine had let me down, and there was nobody, because I must have gone to the doctors hundreds of times being like, please just test my blood for something else, there's something going wrong. I had this gut feeling, and they kept going, Ren, look, we've spent a lot of money, the NHS spent a lot of money looking at your tests, there is nothing wrong with you, it's in your head. Like, some doctors would even laugh at me for going, yeah, but I looked at this on Google, and they're like, oh, you're looking on Google, yeah. Like, look,
yeah. Google always gives you the worst case scenario. Dr. Google, as they say it. You scare yourself. Everybody does it. You scare yourself going on Google. You go on Google to try and make yourself feel better, and the first thing it shows you is the worst case scenario. So, it's, I get that. And, that could send you into craziness. Psychosis, as he said. But, I mean, he knew there was something wrong.
For going, yeah, but I looked at this on Google, and they're like, oh, you're looking on Google, yeah. Like, look,
Google snobbery.
Yeah,
doctors hate that, don't they?
Quite a patronising way, So I, after the allopathic medicine let me down, and I'd gone through the mental health system. I'd been on various SSRIs and like citalopram and whatever, and diazepam, and they hadn't worked, and
chill out.
So I started turning to the spiritual, because that's the only option I could see left, like or homeopathy, or weird. I've done some, not to call that weird, but I've done some weird things. I went to see shamans, I went to see exorcists, I went to see anything that I thought might work. And I was broke at the time as well. I come from a working class background.
This is a guy at this moment in time who's at the end of his tether. You know what I mean? He's chronically ill. He's going through this same shit every single day. He can't see an end to it. His desperation, anything that gives you hope, stuff you would never normally believe in, like I said, shamans or exorcists or stuff. Before you get into this way, so, well, if you've tried every other avenue, you start going on the strange pathway, don't you? Like, say, going seeing a shaman or whatever. Oh, wow.
I've done some weird things. I went to see shamans, I went to see exorcists, I went to see anything that I thought might work. And I was broke at the time as well. I come from a working class background. So all of this stuff was, I'd save up for months and do this one thing that I'd pin my hopes up, and then it wouldn't work. Or sometimes I'd convince a spiritual healer to see me for free and pour my heart out. And it's just like to take so many disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, it's like, it's really difficult to just carry on going. And I didn't really know at the time that all of these experiences was concealing some gold. But anyway, that all accumulated in just a massive breakdown. And I just went into this mode where I thought, this can't be anything other than demonic. And I was convinced that, because I couldn't figure out an explanation, so I was convinced that there must be some either sort of demonic entity possessing me or following me. And then,
well, I suppose that's not as crazy as it sounds, because if you've tried all the avenues, you've had the medicine, you've had the therapy, you've had the mental health avenues and everything, and nothing's worked, and science has told you that there's nothing wrong with you, then what else do you do? What else do you do? How else do you think?
Sort of the demonic entity possessing me or following me, and then beyond that, and that took me some weird places. I had conversation with Satanists and stuff like that. It's really weird, dark period in my life, and or I thought I was part of this experiment, and my psychosis manifested itself in this way that I was like, if I start acting in a way that's not expected of me, I can short circuit this reality. And I can break out of it. So I started doing really bizarre things, and that there was one time I stripped off butt naked, and I went and lay in the middle of a main road and started laughing in hysterics until the police showed up. And and in my mind, that was like, this is what they expect the least, so this is going to help. And obviously none of it helped, but it was so funny. So during this psychosis, I started manically, there was still part of me that was very lucid and present. I started manically looking up on the internet, and I found out about this condition called PANDAS, PANDAS, which is this condition a subsect of autistic kids has, caused by the streptococcal bacterial infection. And I was like, a lot of my symptoms look the same. So I convinced my mum to take me to a gastroenterologist, and I pretended that I had this gut pain
just to get seen for something else, so you can do the relevant tests that you need to diagnose whatever else it is. I get that's smart.
Gastroenterologist, and I pretended that I had this gut pain to which he would prescribe, and I said, "Oh, I've had this antibiotic before. I made up this lie, and I know that this one I get on really well with." So he prescribed me this short course of antibiotics, which was actually against the streptococcal bacteria. What I didn't know at the time was it also targets Lyme disease. I didn't know this at the time, but I was on a different tangent that actually took me to my diagnosis. I took this antibiotic, and all my symptoms went down by about 50% after 2-week course of taking this, and I was like, that's not placebo, because I've taken hundreds of supplements, hundreds of self-treated things on my journey to try and make myself better. This isn't placebo. I know this by now because I'm very familiar with the placebo effect.
You know your own body.
So I go, it didn't cure me, because after a while those symptoms came back. So I saved up money. I went to an infectious disease specialist in Brussels. Wow. I explained everything, my whole story, and he, without even testing my blood, he was like, "You've got Lyme disease, mate." And they tested my blood, and sure enough, antibodies to Lyme disease, positive. And that took me on another big journey to try and cure myself of Lyme.
Wow. Very, very in-depth and personal explanation there from Ren on his experiences with the illness, the fact that he had to go down this avenue, that avenue, everywhere, just to try and get a diagnosis, and then in the end doing a test for something else, to try a different drug, which then led him to the initial diagnosis in the end that was Lyme disease. Wow, how did they not pick it up before? I have no faith in the doctors in this freaking country. They just pass you off. Oh, next one, get paid for this, get paid for that. Just push them off. Say it's this, say it's that. Throw them drugs at them. You know what I mean? And sometimes I don't think they take the duty. I'm not saying it's all doctors, but a lot of them don't take the right duty of care when it comes to people's symptoms and stuff. You know what I mean? How many things get missed because of blasé fucking diagnoses? I'm swearing now. But yeah, that was a very interesting insight from Ren, and obviously Justin, on how Ren was. I need to probably do this interview in its entirety, because that was only 12 minutes of like an hour and a half. So I might do that and break it up into different sections. Anyway, if you like my videos, then please hit like and subscribe, and I shall see you all on the next one.